Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast, where we try to shine a spotlight on stories about local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the U.S. and around the world. I'm John Cross. I am the founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host, Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing tonight?
John, I am doing well. I've got the day off work tomorrow, so I'm kind of got a relaxing evening ahead of myself and doing excited to chat a little soccer with you. It is getting a little warm, though, I will say. My apartment does not airflow well, and this particular corner of it especially, so I'm getting a little toasty already.
Do you not have air conditioning? Is that what I'm
We have
deciphering from that?
we have one small individual rolling unit that we purchased last summer. We finally cracked. I just set it up today, but I have to close the windows, obviously, and it doesn't do a good enough job to warrant closing the windows when it's below 80 degrees. So for now, I suffer.
Well, I think we hit 90 at my house today. So
Oh, wow.
I was, but I'm a little more inland. Don't get any kind of nice breeze normally, but yeah, we went. I've been in my house probably more than 20 years, and it was probably more than 20 years. I don't know, probably close to 15 years ago now, but the AC unit in our house went out. And it was the original unit with the house that was built in the early 70s. And when we went to, it went out, so we went to have it serviced, but it couldn't be serviced because whatever type of Freon and stuff it used that they allowed back in the 70s, they don't allow anymore, and they haven't since the mid 90s. So there was a 6 or 7 year stretch where we went without any kind of central heat or air. That was no fun. And then we finally shopped around for a deal for one, but then you make it through the summer and then you put it off and you don't do anything because we have nice weather here in San Diego. Mm-hmm. So you don't worry about it too much, and then the next summer rolls around, it's almost too late, and you're trying to find someone, you can't get an appointment, and that went on for too many years. So happy to say I have air conditioning now and don't have to worry about that anymore.
Just in time for summer. Very nice.
Yes. All right, so let's talk some soccer. Top of the news for me, at least, just for our early part of the show. Over the weekend, we had the FA Cup final. I'm trying to find my mouse so I can bring this up. And what do you think of this result? Crystal Palace over City.
I mean, it's fantastic. A club winning their first ever trophy is always something you love to see. And I think especially in the context of a club beating Manchester City in the FA Cup final to win their first ever trophy, which I think actually happened. I think Wigan Athletic, when they beat them in 2012 or 13 or whenever that was, I believe that was Wigan's first major trophy as well, against City. So that kind of nice little historical symmetry there. But yeah, I mean, it's hard not to like this Palace team. I assume if you live in London, you might feel differently about that. I really don't know exactly how that. Obviously, there's the London derbies and everything, but I assume that certain London clubs are more bitter towards others. And I don't know how much Crystal Palace factors into that. But anyway, the point being, I have always liked this team. They had Zaha back in the day. They've had Eze for a while now, and Elise up until this year. And I like Oliver Glasner. I liked him even before he got hired by Palace. They have Chris Richards, an American. So they're just a pretty likable team. They've got a nice stadium, the stadium that was used in Ted Lasso. I don't know how any of our viewers feel about that show, but it was the stadium they used as the racetrack or whatever they called it. So it's a club I'm happy to see win. A first ever trophy is obviously amazing. And I would just like to point out that the Magpies broke a trophy drought in February, a bird. The Eagles broke a trophy drought just this past weekend, a bird. I'll just leave it there.
All right. Yeah, I think, as I said, historic, certainly for Crystal Palace, getting their first major trophy, and a team that, I can't remember when they were out of the top flight, but they've always been, or whenever the last time they were out of the top flight, but they've always kind of been a mid-table kind of club.
If I actually can interject with a stat I saw
Yeah.
today to that point,
Okay.
with their win today, for the last 11 seasons since they came to the top flight, or 12, whatever it is, they've finished between 41 and 49 points. And by winning today, they've secured their highest ever record Premier League points tally with 52 points. So that
Wow.
really, yeah, there you go. And they're like, what, 12th, I think? So.
Yeah, they kind of, they're never really a relegation threat, and they're not really in Europe, but they're just kind of consistently there. And one of the things I saw online, I think the Cooligans did a little bit on this, like talking about financial fair play and has it leveled the playing field. And I feel like for decades, the argument maybe against one of the arguments against promotion relegation is you always get the same teams that win. And, I'd say if you look to Germany's recent form over the last 10 to 15 years, that's certainly have one team that has dominated. But even if you look at the Premier League, and, when I think about when people were saying that, and I think of the teams that were consistently at the top or even kind of mid-table, and which teams are more up at the top and mid-table now, there's a couple that are the same, but it's certainly changed. When you're talking about, especially this year, Dylan, the Spurs and the Manchester Uniteds of the world and the Evertons and stuff that are behaving more like mid-table teams. So do you think financial fair play in a way has helped level the playing field in something like the Premier League?
Broadly speaking, yes. But I think that what it has done is it's taken that kind of level of like actual competitiveness from only having like 6 or so clubs above it to a point where we've now got about 17 clubs above it. And what I mean by that is that it's made the Premier League itself more competitive, but I fear we're rapidly heading to a point where it's going to be like the same 3 of like 7 teams yo-yoing between the Championship and the Premier League each and every season. And guess who's coming back next year? It's Burnley and Leeds. And we might get Sheffield United again. So yes, it has leveled the playing field at the top level, or broadly speaking at the top level. Obviously, like the top is still somewhat the same clubs, but it will have knock-on effects, though. That disparity has to be somewhere, I suppose, because the system hasn't been fixed. But I would, to your point, generally speaking, yes, the top level is broadly more competitive than it was even 5 years ago.
See, and I think I would make the argument that the Championship has gotten significantly stronger top to bottom since financial fair play has been introduced. I think it has allowed more teams to creep up into the Prem. And like you talked about, there's some that are yo-yoing back and forth, but I think that is a bit of a product of, and it's not always the same teams. You may get them for a couple of years, but then someone else new comes up. And look at the teams, all the B teams, your Brightons and your, God, why am I blanking out on everything? Your Brentfords and, like they have not historically been in the top flight until very recently and are doing very well. And I think it's changed the way teams have to look at their roster. You can't stack players, which I felt was what a lot of teams were doing before financial fair play was introduced. And yes, financial fair play is complicated and it's not perfect. And I know they're looking at changes, improvements, I guess. But I do think it has helped level the playing field, and we're seeing the knock-on effects that, at least in England especially, is strengthening the leagues below it.
Yeah, I mean it can kind of cut both ways, right? Because it's the clubs. I think they're for what 5 seasons in receipt of the parachute payments, so that's kind of what leads to that exaggerated yo-yo effect. I'm looking now, and I think as far as I can tell, the last team to get promoted and then consolidate and stay in the Premier League is Nottingham Forest in the 22-23 season. So that's 2 full seasons now where the promoted clubs have immediately gone back down. Just for reference, I'm not saying that proves a point or doesn't. But yeah, maybe that will continue to knock on down the championship, right? Like we just saw Luton just got relegated again. They've done a double
Right.
relegation, unfortunately. So they're now going to be one of the richest clubs in League One, which I'm sure they never thought they'd be in a position to say. So, Norwich were a yo-yo club and are now not so much anymore. So maybe that wealth is slowly matriculating. I don't think that's the right word, but you know what I mean, down
Right.
the pyramid. But it's a slow grind. So I don't know. I tend to agree with you, though, especially when people talk about, the same team's winning all the time. I think if you take a longer view, that's not really always true. But and that's the beauty of the cup competitions, too. But anyway, that's a whole
Right.
other conversation. So
Right. All right. Well, let's stick with pro rel idea, but shift gears to this hemisphere. Did you see that the second division teams in Mexico are suing to make sure promotion and relegation gets re-implemented?
I did. To be honest with you, thought that they had done this already. I feel like there's been rumblings about it for a couple of years now. I'm glad to see it. And to be completely honest with you, I think that Mexico probably has a more robust and honest and fair judicial system and like workers' rights kind of focused judicial system at this point, based on the very little I know about Mexican politics. Let me just hold my hands up and say that. I think they have a really good chance of, having some sympathy in the courts there and winning this case. So I see that as positive.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, a couple of things. One, I did not realize till I saw these two articles come up, one in the Athletic and the other from, our good friend Cesar Hernandez from ESPN. And I did not realize the 6 years had elapsed, right? Like, this was a 6 year kind of
Right.
time period and buffer. And this is the year it was supposed to wrap up. In my mind, I kept thinking that was a year or two off, or I don't know why I had
Okay.
like 2028 in my mind or something. But their season is about ready to wrap up, and nobody knows what's going to happen. And this is supposed to be the end of this temporary pause. I thought it was very interesting. I saw a comment from, I don't know, some of the Atletico Madrid ownership, and who owns, I don't forget now which team in Mexico, but they were saying, well, they're in North America and they're a little closer to the US and they're not really in Europe, so maybe they should do things differently. Maybe a closed league is a better system like they have in the US, and basically saying if I had a vote for it, I would vote to keep the league closed and keep everybody else out. I thought that was very telling. One of, again, the ownership groups trying to protect the owners, and this being a voice in Europe. I think they think if the in Mexico, if they can close off their league and get rid of promotion relegation, exclude those lower league teams and solidify that power, I think that would open the door to some areas in Europe looking to possibly do the same thing with their top divisions. I mean, we already know about the Super League and people
Yeah.
trying to do that, and then they've won their, court of arbitration that they technically can move forward. But it's been very quiet on that front. So I think maybe there's some test cases. I personally, of course, if someone who likes the idea of promotion relegation, and we focus on grassroots soccer, and the only way those lower league teams, have the hope of being up there is climbing that ladder and through meritocracy. So really hope you are correct and those lower league teams win in court and get something which may not happen still for a year, but it may not happen at the end of this year right away. But I hope that it does happen.
Yeah, I do as well. And you're right. I hadn't even considered, but that would set a pretty bad precedent for the clubs would be all over this sort of thing if they could. So, um,
All right, well, let's switch gears here. Something a little more humorous, and I am not going to try to say the initials of the club here, but Romanian club FCSB, who we saw, I believe, in the Conference League this year. They won the Romanian league again this year, and I don't know if you saw this, that it's not their walkout, but they came out before the match all because they'd already clinched the league in superhero outfits. So I thought that
I
was
had
pretty
not.
funny
That
that
is fun. Yeah.
they came out to the fans and everything before, pre-match, all in superhero outfits.
That's pretty cool. They're a good club that is exemplifies the power of an open system too, because the
Exactly.
original FC style Bucharest, or I think it's FCSB technically now. It's Football Club FCSB or something like that.
Right.
It's like a Phoenix Club version of the original Stowe Bucharest, and they claim the history. They keep the stars from the European titles. But yeah, so another a Wimbledon type example of a club that rose from the ashes.
Right. Yeah, and that's good. And again, yeah, it's a little corny, but I love when teams do more things outside of soccer and connect with their fans and their community in some
Absolutely.
way that extends beyond the pitch,
Yeah.
because I think that just brings the whole community closer together.
The kids will love that sort of thing too, and you getting the next generation interested is always a big part of it. So
Right. All right, well, let's switch gears to the Open Cup here for just a couple of minutes. We'll do more of a recap of this round. I'm just jumping in. Ooh, right away. I was just checking the score of the match that's currently going on while we are recording here on a Tuesday evening. So Chicago is currently up 3-0 over New England with looks like about 3 minutes to play. So there's another game later tonight. Portland, San Jose. Is that who's playing later tonight, I believe?
correct, yes.
Right. But then tomorrow, we have a big whip around show, which is going to be nice. So if you are listening to this in time for Wednesday before the Open Cup round, if you go on Paramount Plus on the Golazo Network, they'll do a whip around show because what are there, 8 games? So 6 of the games will be going on pretty much at the same time tomorrow. I think it starts at 4:30 Pacific time.
That seems right. There are 5 games starting at that time slot. So
Yeah, I think one starts, I don't know, half hour later or something, just a little bit off.
Austin and Houston is at 6 p.m. our time. So I figured that's
Got
about
it.
8 p.m. local time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure the whip around show is probably just going to be for the other games that are going on concurrently. But they will all be on Paramount Plus for anybody who wants to catch those. So any thoughts coming into this round of 16 for the Open Cup?
I will probably check out the Whip Around show more just out of interest to see how they do that coverage. Other than that, I'm hope Pittsburgh go through, but I unfortunately my passion for the tournament dwindles as it gets more and more MLS focused. So yeah, I'm glad that CBS are taking the coverage seriously. So for that, I will probably at least check it out.
Yeah. Well, I always like trying to find the storylines on the Open Cup, and I do like, and I will as well be watching Pittsburgh, and because they are the last lower league team remaining. But with this apparent victory that looks like Chicago is going to have over New England tonight, Chicago will keep themselves on pace to be, if they can win this year or whenever the next time is, that'll make 5 Open Cup titles for them. They'll be the first team in the modern era to reach 5. We've talked in previous episodes about some of those historic teams, Bethlehem Steel and Fall River and Maccabi Los Angeles. But Chicago would be the first team of our more modern era of soccer to actually get 5 titles. So I'll be, that'll be kind of be in the background, to make for an interesting story if they can do that, since we, haven't had anybody reach that yet of the
I
modern era.
suppose.
I suppose.
I didn't realize that, but yeah, happy for him. Is Shaqiri's? No, Shaqiri's moved back to Switzerland, right? He's not playing for Chicago anymore.
Yeah, I'm the wrong
No,
person
he's
to
not.
ask for that.
No, he's not. I'm looking at it right now. He's not. Okay. Anyway.
Well, one last bit of news regarding the Open Cup. The National Amateur Cup is still going on right now with the regional qualifications, and we're in Region 4 out here on the West Coast, and applications are due this Friday. So it looks like they're doing similar to what they've done at least the last year, is see how many teams apply that want to participate, and then they'll do some kind of tournament and some kind of finals. And the finals, I think, are going to take place at a sports complex in Utah for this year. But then the winners of the 4 regions will play off for the National Amateur Cup. So Region 4, those applications are closing. Region 3, can't find any information on their website for what's going on, so I have no idea. But Region 2 and Region 1 really have their act together. They have lots of teams participating, do a full-on lower league tournament. So I think the National Amateur Cup is in kind of round 2 right now, so still in the early rounds. But Region 1, so over on the East Coast, they had the semifinals, I think both semifinal matches this last weekend. And one of the semifinals was Lansdowne Yonkers against the Principian Freedoms. And those 2 teams, I mean, the Principian Freedoms are the defending national amateur champions. Lansdowne won it 21, 22, somewhere around there, just a couple years back. So they met up in a semifinal match, and I was just looking for results, and I stumbled across the match. I actually watched the highlights, and then I went back and watched most of the match today, and that was an entertaining match. Lansdowne goes up 2-0, 2 goals about 5 minutes apart in the first half, and then the Principian Freedoms come back in the second half, score a goal. As the attacker goes to get the ball out of the net and the goalkeeper has it in hand, they're kind of fighting over it. The goalkeeper shoves the forward in the face, and then the forward totally flops, but red card from the refs. So now Lansdowne is down to 10 men. They get back on the field just 2 minutes later. The Principian Freedoms tie it up. And then there's a red card for Principian Freedoms, so they're both at 10. And then you get a third goal, and then it's just wild towards the end. It was, but again, a lot of fun. And one of the things I love is these teams play over on the East Coast, and I forget exactly where they are exactly in the level, but I think the Eastern Soccer League, which I'm blanking out on the full name, but they've changed the name to, I think, the American Premier Soccer League. But APSL, but they do promotion relegation over there and have lots of teams. So, these teams are not only playing for the right to get to the final of their regional tournament and then to represent their region in the National Amateur Cup, which then gives them a berth in the Open Cup. But there's, it was some good soccer. We've seen both of these teams in the Open Cup play some good soccer, and these are at levels that are down, a notch or two, certainly from our highest divisions, but it's not bad soccer. And I think about this all the time. If we continue on our theme of promotion relegation, if we had everything tied together in some kind of way, how, what am I trying to say? Maybe the opportunity that these teams would have, or maybe a little more investment might come to some of these clubs that are already doing good things to take it to that next step, because there is a next step for them to go forward. And hopefully, and this is something maybe we can have a conversation on a later show, is that these regional leagues, along with something like the League for Clubs, will start organizing a little better on the amateur side and really put upward pressure on maybe something like USL to force a full opening of at least the Division Three on USL, or USL League One, and open that up down into the amateur ranks for people to be able to promote up. So anyway,
Yeah,
the bottom line, it was a great game, and I ended up spending a couple hours this morning kind of going through that just as I was trying to prep and get some things ready. Stumbled across a great game between two good teams.
yeah. I think people underestimate the point, or rather the degree to which lower league soccer can be excellent games just because they're not literally the most technically gifted players on earth, or maybe they are just before they've been discovered. Who knows? But that doesn't mean it can't be an entertaining game because it's still going to be relatively evenly matched. And the thing about football, the thing that we all love about it is that sometimes it doesn't have to be, it makes sense, right? Like it doesn't have to be the team with the sum total of more technical ability is going to win. Um, you have to play the game. But yeah, I've come across the Eastern Premier League and their, or whatever it was called, and their whole kind of internal promotion relegation structure, of which I think they have like 4 levels or something. So that I think is really one of the few good kind of models of what American soccer could look like. So maybe someday.
Yes, maybe someday. Hopefully, that will not be too far away. Trying to get something prepped and ready here for our next part. But let's go ahead and leave the Open Cup now and just look at some general lower league news. And I'm going to skip the first story and I'll come back to that because I'm trying to set something up for that, a visual that I want to show, but I got to get a couple things ready. But there was, gosh, why can't I remember the name? Is one of the things I hate about my post-COVID kind of medical situation that I've been going through with this long COVID is I forget things so much. But Beyond the 90, if you don't follow them, they're a great resource and follow a lot of all levels of soccer and both sides, men's and women's. But they do some good coverage also on USL League One, and they have a reporter there that I'm blanking out his name. It's Alex something, but they do this semi-regular kind of update of what's happening with USL expansion, and a new one of those came out today or yesterday. I saw it today, and really digs into some of these new teams that are coming in to USL, probably League One, and quite a few League Two teams looking to bump up to League One, and what might happen on the expansion side from the next year, so 2026 and then 2027. But you could see potentially 14, 15 teams, an expansion of 14 or 15 teams in League One if everything plays out. Now, it doesn't always, and then we also have new teams that might show up, but that was an interesting story and really would really help with the growth in that. So I don't know if you saw that article, but what are your thoughts about the potential of League One in USL expanding by another, even let's say a dozen teams?
Yeah, I did see that article. And I think we've talked about this maybe even on this show. You kind of have to, if you've been paying attention the last few years, you kind of have to have wondered if this was the direction they were going, because they've been pushing expansion teams towards League One. You're not seeing a lot of brand new, fresh championship teams anymore. I know it happens, but not as much. And there's kind of a mix of clubs in League Two, right? You have like second teams of bigger clubs. You have clubs that are really there on the developmental side, but then you also have some clubs where you kind of get the gist, like they are waiting for the right time to move up because they have
Yes.
the fan base, the infrastructure. Teams like Ballard FC, I genuinely don't know if they're going to do that, but I think if they wanted to, they very easily could if the financial backing is there. And so I would expect that now the league has said we're doing this pro rel thing. We're starting the D1 league. They're going to need more teams to build out the pyramid. teams in League One are the natural, or League Two rather, are the natural obvious kind of place to start because they're already running, they're already within the system. They have the infrastructure already. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that it bodes well for the future if what you'd like to see, which I would, is what you're describing is eventually an listen to me, more open system that allows for amateur clubs to become professional, if that's what they want. And so, I think obviously I'm reading a lot of tea leaves there, but I think it feels like another step along the path I would like to see USL take towards an open pyramid. And for that, I am excited by it.
Yeah, it certainly seemed from the article that there were quite a few groups that may have been entertaining something like MLS Next Pro or some other avenue that they might have solidified on USL specifically due to the promotion relegation, that they're able to get in and grow and do it on merit, but also with the time being right and people even testing the waters, like you said, in League Two. So that is interesting to me. So what I want to do for this next story is take it down like to the League Two level, but not in USL, but with the League for Clubs. Now, I've been personally super excited about the League for Clubs and what they have accomplished in a year, basically. They announced, I can't even remember, but about a year ago that they were going to do this. They started, I'll call it siphoning off teams from the NPSL, but basically it was teams, organizations that were unhappy with what was happening in the NPSL. And they kicked off this first year, which let me just pull up this graphic. Hopefully this will be there. I love this interactive map done by Zach Leichner, I think is the last name. He has several of these, but they're great interactive maps to pull up little push pins for where all the clubs are. But this is the footprint right now for the League of Clubs. And they've really focused on pockets where they have enough teams that can play that are close together. They haven't just picked teams and they're spread out and they have tremendous travel costs. So you can kind of see the pockets when you look at the map. They have a Gulf Coast kind of area, a Texas area. They have a mountain conference. They have one in Northern California and they have one on the East Coast. But 50-ish teams already in this first year. And I'm already hearing lots of buzz about other teams joining for the next year. And one of the stories that just came out is the Midwest Premier League, which I'm going to add to this map that we can see on the screen, that they're going to be folding or partnering, I guess, with the Midwest Premier League and creating a level on top of the Midwest Premier League, which already does promotion relegation, and creating a level above that within the League of Clubs. So now in the Midwest Premier League, kind of like we have on the East Coast with the American Premier Soccer League, now you're going to have three different levels. You're going to have what they already have in the Midwest Premier League. So you could really start at a local grassroots level and work your way up and then get into the League of Clubs, which is becoming more of a national footprint. And if this keeps growing the way it is and USL keeps doing their things, I would really hope that there's an opportunity for these two to work together and help that the League of Clubs can become that de facto Division 4 and really help increase that transition from the amateur game and have it be a little more truly semi-pro before you maybe go into what we consider our bottom tier of professional soccer in the U.S., which is Division 3.
I did not know about the Midwest Premier League joining in with the League for Clubs. I did know they had their internal promotion relegation, so that's
just announced in the last couple of days.
So. Oh, okay, so I just missed it then. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's like a very literal, robust, merit-based system. And first of all, that's fantastic, and I'm glad they're getting involved. And I truthfully haven't really kept up with this League for Club league for club things. So I need to check that out a little bit more. But I will say real quick, my main thought during this was just how frustrating it is that we have all the disparate components of like one of the world's most deep and rich and robust soccer pyramids. And all it would take is the U.S. Soccer Federation saying, if you guys want your league like certification licenses, we all have to sit down and work together. And we could just have this incredible thing, and they just don't do it. Anyway,
yeah, well, we won't do it on the men's side, but in just a few minutes, we're going to look at the women's side and look at the unbelievable amount of teams there are in this country that I don't think people realize, and what we're missing. And well, let me back up a second. I think things like the League of Clubs and these regional strong leagues like the Midwest Premier League and the American Premier Soccer League are successful in spite of the U.S. Soccer Federation. If we just had some better governance, like there are so many teams here to be able to help work this out. And all these leagues they're streaming their games, right? They've worked with local media partners to help do it. They've got announcers for their games. I mean, yes, it's lower league soccer, and it's not like you're going to see on, you're not watching Champions League production, but you can follow teams, and you could follow your team when they have away matches. There's the ability to be involved and keep your community involved that we just didn't have 20, 30 years ago. And with a little bit of guidance and structure, and if all this can fall into place, I mean, we already have robust clubs at a lower level. We just need to give them like the carrot to kind of work up. And whichever ones want to take that pathway can invest and take that pathway. And the others can still be part of the full system, not, a castaway off to the side because a billionaire club decided they weren't going to let you in.
Well, and that's a thing too, is that frustrates me is people talk about, you kind of touched on the MLS Next Pro versus USL, which I suppose doesn't really factor into this league for clubs thing just yet, although maybe at some point that they'll be a factor kind of in that discussion as well. But people always talk about like, oh, well, MLS Next Pro comes with the financial stability and the chance to like, they've been dangling that carrot over some of these clubs to try and get them to come over to MLS Next Pro, right? Like, oh, maybe you could be an MLS club someday, right? But you could do that and then maybe have the chance to spend $500+ million just to start being a top level club, or you could come into one of these systems and spend a fraction of that money and win your way there. If you're so confident in yourself, you should be able to do that. So it just goes another level to show just how ridiculous it is, the way, not even the structure, like beyond the structure of soccer in the United States, the way we talk about it sometimes is so distorted towards this like owner focused view. It frustrates the crap out of me sometimes.
Right. A commodity versus community. All right, well, let's keep it in lower league, but we're going to shift local here. Let's focus on San Diego. We mentioned last week we're going to focus on women's soccer. We did have a question we put out as to how many lower league pre-professional women's teams, we're not counting college teams here, but adult women's teams there are in San Diego. And I did you give a number? I can't remember if we put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think I guess 9-10-ish.
Yeah, and that would be it in the two leagues we're going to look at. That would be close. I think we're actually at 8, and it fluctuates a little bit. And we're going to talk about two leagues. First, the USLW. Which is obviously USL's, I'll say, new venture into women's soccer, because it started in 2022, but actually there was an old, what was called for most of its time, the W League. It was under the USL. And that started in 1995 and went to 2015. So we had 20 years that the USL properties had a league, the W League, that at various times was quite strong because it depended whether we had a first division women's league, with top players in this country or not. But when it started, that old USLW was just a single tier from 95 to 97. Then in 98 through 01, they split into two tiers. So it didn't have a ton of teams, but split into two tiers. So they had the first division and the second division, or W1 and W2. And we had that for a while. And there was some good soccer being played. And if you go back and look historically, that some of the people who played on our national teams, some of the people who played for other first division teams in like the WUSA or some of the other women's leagues that we've had, played on a lot of these teams in between those seasons where we didn't have like a true top flight league. So we had the W1 and W2. When the WUSA started in 2001, that, like what always happens, when we get the rich owners that start a new team and start paying a bunch of people money and pull a bunch of players from existing teams, right, has a very depressive effect. And that started some contraction in the W League at that time. And the WUSA only lasted 3 seasons, I think, before it folded. And in that time, it kind of, caused some teams to fold or change with their structure. But then after the WUSA ended in 2003, I think, then the W League picked up again because now you got all these players looking for a club and looking to go play to stay fit. And they finally reached a high of 41 teams in 2008. And I want you to remember some of these numbers because we're going to share some of the numbers of these new leagues here coming up. So they had a high of 41 teams in 2008. Do you remember economically what happened in 2008?
I do. Then the housing bubble burst. Yes.
Yeah.
Stock
So,
market crashed.
That certainly doesn't help, right? You have, again, outside influences have a depressive effect on women's soccer. And the W League really goes through, and I'll have to dig deeper. I don't know. I mean, that was certainly a factor. There were other things going on, probably combined, I'm guessing, with some mismanagement and not doing very well. But eventually in 2015, they're down to 18 teams and they disband. In fact, it would make for a good podcast episode probably another time, is just how that whole playoffs of that year just fell apart. Teams refused to play. Some teams forfeited their match. Like it was ugly. And some of those teams left and joined a league that's still going, United Women's Soccer. Some went to the WPSL, which we're also going to talk about here in a second because that has a direct impact here on SanDiego. But and a couple of them, I'm not sure where all the teams went exactly, but teams that wanted to continue found a way to continue doing something else. So from that time in 2018 or 2015, I'm sorry, when the 8 of those teams form United Women's Soccer, which is really heavier in the East Coast, like the upper East Coast and the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region. They're now, I think this year, at 25 teams. And the United Women's Soccer, they do have a SoCal division, but I think it's only got 4 or 5 teams in it. But there's a few that play, and I have never seen a match, but my understanding is the quality is pretty good. That's why the teams stay playing in some of these leagues, maybe as opposed to going somewhere else. But over that same time period, so there's 25 teams in United Women's Soccer right now. There are more than, by my count, when I was looking through and doing the research, more than 50 teams have left. So they started at 8, they're at 25, but more than 50 have come and gone. and for a variety of reasons. Some went to the new USLW that started in 2022. Some went back to the WPSL, and some went other regional leagues and other places. Some folded, obviously, and don't exist anymore, or like a Phoenix Club, rebranded into something else. But that's kind of been the very bumpy road of lower league women's soccer, but on one side. So the USL, after disbanding and really in a not good way in 2015, abandoning women's soccer completely. And that was around the time they were really reorganizing on the men's side. Of course, you had, the NASL stuff was kind of coming towards its end around that time. But you had, a lot going on the men's side, and then USL restructured on the men's side and really got on, I think I would argue, more solid footing. And then they decided to make a pitch to go back on the women's side. And they announced this in 2021, which, like, we're deep in the pandemic still at this time, trying to bring things back. And they played their first season in 2022. So for this 2025 season, they've expanded by an additional 27 teams, including one in San Diego, which we'll talk about in just a second. But they expanded by 27 teams. They're playing this season, if I remember reading correctly, with 93 teams. So in 3 years, right? So I guess this would be the 4th season. But they're now up to 93 teams, which I find staggering. Like,
Yeah.
That's crazy. So they're up to 2025, or in 2025, they're expanded by 27 teams. They're up to 93, and they now have a new SoCal division, which has 5 teams in it, and one of them is in San Diego, and that entry is the SoCal Dutch Lions. And if the Dutch Lions sound familiar, they have quite a few teams around the country that are of the Dutch Lions brand, but they have this new entry in the USLW, playing at this 3rd tier in women's soccer, but here in San Diego. So we have another. Now, I have to be careful. I was going to say professional, and I'm not sure. I'm sure you can make arguments lots of different ways, but I'm not sure anybody right now, even though it's Division 3 women's soccer, I'm not sure what the requirements were, if it's even labeled as professional.
Well, I think they call it
pre-professional,
right?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the women's side if that has been defined down to Division 3.
I thought I'd heard USLW referred to as a pre-professional league, but maybe I was thinking of something else.
Well, I think it has been, but I don't recall seeing the actual standards for women's soccer down to Division 3. So that's something I'm going to have to look up as well to educate myself. But we do have a team. We have the Dutch Lions. They play at SanDiego Academy. They have their first match coming up this weekend at 1:30, I believe. So if you want to check out, another San Diego team in women's soccer, that is something that you can go do. And I only imagine with the amazing growth in USL with USLW that they've done over these last 4 years, and with changes that are happening and growth with the Super League, like, that's Division 1, you've got Division 3, you're kind of missing that Division 2. That I think what the USL looks like to me they're trying to do is really grow out the USLW league and then take some of the best teams from there and graduate them up to a 2nd division, and apply for that once they really have a broader base filled out.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic. I've thought for a long time it made a lot of sense to focus on trying to implement some sort of pyramid on the women's side, just because the game seems more malleable over there. Over there, I say, as opposed to the men's side, which has a lot of kind of entrenched biases and things like that.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because I haven't heard no talk officially, anywhere publicly about a pro rel setup on the women's side. But it certainly looks like they are really trying to organize a pathway to be able to do that, especially if it takes off on the men's side. And you certainly have a ton of teams. So 93 teams in the USLW League. And we have a team here in San Diego. And they're also, just as a side note, there is a men's team in USL2 in San Diego, which we haven't had for years. So we have a team in USL2 on the men's side also in San Diego. And we're going to talk about the men's side in a different episode. And if you're interested in information about the W League, you can, Protagonist is a great place to go for all things lower league soccer, but also the USL show has started a new podcast, and I think they call it the Semi-Pro, and where they focus on USLW and League Two on the men's side. And I think I saw that was going to be a daily podcast.
Oh, wow. Well, good for them. I hadn't heard about that one. I'm pretty sure Backheeled also covers the USLW League as well.
And this is another great thing about technology and the internet, and with having something like promotion relegation, is there are so many independent outlets that are out there that cover lower league soccer. There are people who cover as their main point of focus these regional leagues. So there's ways to find the information and follow your team and watch games. And again, I think it's a matter of time until we kind of open that all up. Let's see. Okay, so that's the USLW. We do have other women's teams, because we talked about there were like 8 teams, and that's only one of them. So where do the other teams play? Well, there is another league called the WPSL, which has had a strong San Diego presence for years, right? The WPSL started in 1998. And I don't remember how many teams, small amount, maybe getting barely into double digits, and it started on the West Coast. But they started with a single tier, handful of teams early on, and now in 2025, they have more than 150 teams across the country. So just between the USLW and the WPSL, and they're not the only leagues running women's pre-professional teams. UPSL does it. We already talked about United Women's Soccer, but you're talking somewhere between 200 or roughly 250 just teams between these two leagues. Now in San Diego, we have in the WPSL, we have a team that was most recently referred to as the San Diego Sea Lions. They no longer exist, but they were around for probably, 25, 30 years, somewhere in there, pretty close. I'd have to look at the exact dates. They also been known as San Diego WFC, Women's Football Club. Auto Trader San Diego, they were known as at one point, because Auto Trader was their sponsor. But that local San Diego team, they were the champions of the WPSL in the year 2000 and again in 2013. And they were also runners-up in 1999 and 2016. So we have had some strong presence in the women's game on this pre-professional, professional kind of mixed sides, because it really depends what was happening, between whether we had a first division women's league or not. Because we had the WUSA, we had was it the WPS around 2010-ish? And then finally we got the NWSL, which seems, at least at this point, relatively stable. But all that time, through all those leagues, the WPSL has been running. And they have a Southern California conference. It has 11 teams in it. And I'm not sure about one of the teams, but 6 or 7 of those teams are based here in San Diego. And they actually started, in the last couple of weeks, they've started. We have a couple of teams that haven't had their first match yet. but they're in full swing and they're spread all around our county. So again, soccer to go and check out. And some of these teams have been around for a very, very long time participating at the WPSL level. So we have a pretty, and this doesn't count, we already have a lot of youth clubs and we have all our colleges we have in the region. These are teams in addition to those where people keep playing and play at a pretty high level.
Goes to show how deep the talent pool is here and how that's just an absurd amount of untapped potential.
Right. And one thing I forgot to mention, just as an aside for those people who do know, do you remember Carrie Taylor?
Does not ring a bell.
All right. So Carrie Taylor, for a lot of people who are listening, will probably know, but she was heavily involved. She did a podcast, Women Talk Football. Then she got involved with Soccer City, and she was helping do that. And then because she met Landon, was good friends with Landon, and has a coaching license, everything, she was one of the first assistant coaches for the San Diego Row
yes,
when they started in USL. And at the time, I believe, was the only female coach in the USL. Well, she has moved on and done a couple other things. She was worked with the Jamaican Soccer Federation for a while. I think she might actually still live here in San Diego, but she is now the technical director for the USL Super League. So
okay,
that's
yes,
a little
that's
San Diego connection.
Very cool.
All right, so what I want to display here quickly, I'm going to switch back to our map that we had, and I'm going to actually do this live. Now, as I said, Zach Leichner has a ton of different maps. I'm just going to pull up, as you can already see it, this women college soccer map, and we'll try to position it a little better on the screen and wait for it to populate here.
Yeah, wow.
But this is, oh, sorry, this was the college one I did. But we'll come back to that because we're going to talk about that as well. There it is, women's soccer. Okay, and over on the side, I don't know if anybody's watching on video, how easy it is to see, but this includes regional leagues. It includes the UWS, United Women's Soccer, UPSL, their women's teams. It includes the USLW, the WPSL, and the WPSL is going to be starting a Division II league as well, the Super League and the NWSL. But these are all the women's teams we have in the country. And it's, again, if we had a unified structure, just to pull all these people under the same pyramid, and yes, some of these are amateur teams, and there's no way they're competing right away in NWSL. But if there was the avenue for people to move up and people knew they could do that and invest, like we're starting to hear rumors about USL League One, people are like, yeah, well, they're doing promotion relegation. So yeah, why wouldn't I get in at League One and see if we can move our way up? We have so many teams. I think the UPSL as a lower league, if you count all their Premier and Division One and women's teams, men's team, everything, I think they have more than 400 teams in the UPSL in one league. Now that's both genders, but that's a ridiculous amount of teams, and that's one league. So this is everything on the screen here, and you can see the footprint. I mean, I always think it's kind of funny if you follow down, what is it, the Missouri River, I guess, over here on this. But anyway, the eastern part of the country is so much more heavily populated with teams than we are on the West Coast. We have our pockets, Southern California, the Bay Area, the Pacific Northwest. You have a little bit in some of your mountain regions, some in Arizona, but
It's
And
funny
this,
because, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say these lower league soccer maps are actually a very good population density map of the United States, because if you were to overlay that on this, it's
Yes.
nearly identical. You have a wall of like red or whatever color you use to show density, and then it
Right.
freaking stops at Nebraska, just like
Yeah.
this.
And I think this is one of the challenges of us. And again, we can save this for another conversation on a different podcast. But one of the challenges of both implementing pro-rel, but also trying to lessen travel for leagues. You have high concentrations in Southern California, Northern California, and the Pacific Northwest. Great for your lowest of your low levels. People don't have to travel much, but eventually at some point, especially if you're on the West Coast, and even if you regionalize to some extent, well, I'll pull up a map here in a second, but even if you regionalize like the adult association does, you still have all these big gaps, and they match the population density, as you said. But let me go back, and I'm just going to pull the college soccer one back up, which we see is, even more dense than what we had on the other side. And I only bring this up because there has been a lot of conversation, and I've heard it mostly in soccer, but I'm starting to hear it in basketball and other sports. And I think this week, if I remember correctly, the International Basketball Association is trying to get basketball, college basketball in the US, especially now with the name, image, likeness stuff and the potential for paying players, that they want to see some kind of training compensation. And same thing with soccer, that if you get someone who's been at a club of the youth, but then they come over for college in the US, that's what they're looking at. And they're already looking at, for college soccer, the possibility of leaving the NCAA umbrella and coming under the US soccer umbrella. So if you take what's on the screen now, all the colleges, now this is junior colleges, this is everything. This is any college team, any post-high school education team. But if you take all the colleges along with all the other programs that are out there, like, you immediately have a great base to a pyramid that you can start to build up from. And same thing on the men's side. If you start getting all these colleges, if they truly start operating under US soccer and maybe come in at a Division 3-ish kind of level, and you're paying players, these are conversations that are starting to happen because the entire landscape has changed within the NCAA, in addition to some of the policies within the NCAA that have come about, especially this calendar year. So how that shapes out over the next couple of years, I think, is going to be very interesting to watch. Nothing may happen. They may just reorganize as colleges, but there's the possibility, and a lot of talk within U.S. soccer circles, to bring the colleges in under the U.S. soccer umbrella and treat them as clubs.
Well, I will say that as somebody who has followed the NCAA and their battle to monopolize the labor output of young athletes most of my life for various reasons, I can tell you that the way NCAA has been dealing with this NIL stuff has not been well. They are basically finding themselves in a position time after time where they don't feel like they have any power, and they're forced to just rubber stamp stuff. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they were keen to just cede off governance of these things that aren't really making them money, which is a pretty cynical way to look at it. But I would argue that's probably how they look at it. So I think on its face, the idea of college soccer professionalizing the way we've described it maybe seems a bit far-fetched, but I don't know. There's something in the water, and I do wonder if there's the desire on the part of the infrastructure that exists, it could absolutely happen.
Well, I think that's the huge thing, is the colleges have that infrastructure.
Right.
And maybe it's not, I mean, maybe technically it's a club team. Maybe it just rents the facilities, a way for the colleges to make some money off of the facilities. I don't know. Right? There's a whole bunch of things that can go into this, but we have talked lots of times. One of the things we like about soccer is that community and the passion and what people do not only in the stands and together and singing and chanting, but what happens off the pitch as well and outside of the stadium. The only place that really comes close to replicating that in the US are college sports. And I think this is why people like watching a lower tier of sport, because the football is not as good as the NFL, the basketball is not as good as the NBA, but the passion and the atmosphere in the arenas and stuff are fantastic. So, it and a lot of people still watch and associate with their alma mater or maybe a school they grew up near, or they just picked a school when they were young and that's their team they're going to follow, and they follow it in a variety of different sports. I mean, it is also a way to bring in potentially a lot more eyeballs to the sport because, now it's University of Michigan's team, or it's Michigan's team, or they just called the Wolverines and they play at the University of Michigan, whatever it is.
They can still be the University of Michigan Wolverines and just not be students. The same way that, Universidad, America de
Right.
Nuevo León or whatever is, I think it is. I don't speak Spanish very well, if that wasn't obvious. But, it can happen.
Right. And they wouldn't necessarily have to be students, but they still could be kind of connected to the community. We've talked about this before. I also thought it would be fantastic what if every high school had a team, and it was
Yeah.
the alumni from the team. Like you could graduate from the high school team into, it doesn't have to be the alumni from the school, but there is a team you could keep playing for, and a team that's still, it's a community team, still has a connection to the community like the high school does. But if you took all the colleges and all the high schools, and there's no way every college and every high school would have a team, but if you did and you could, now you're replicating the density of something you'd see like in Britain, and you could have, like, especially in Southern California, the number of tiers, like we could go down multiple tiers, like 10, a dozen tiers kind of thing. Frankly, high school sports already do this, right? They do their own version of promotion relegation. I don't know how many people are familiar, since a lot of people are removed away from, at least in the San Diego section. They've done it for years, that depending how you finish a previous season could move you up a division or move you down. They got away with school size being the determination of which division you were in a decade ago, more than a decade ago. And now it's all based on how you do each year. So you could win the championship in Division 4, and now you're going to be playing up in Division 3, or not do as well and drop down. So they already in sports do a promotion relegation with our high school athletics here in San Diego, and have been doing for quite a while. And it makes it a lot more competitive. You're not stuck in a league with a small school and a few large schools and you're getting thumped all the time. Or you get the small Catholic basketball school that is outstanding and just stomps everybody because all the other schools are small and just don't have strong teams. Those strong teams play the other strong teams, and the teams that are not as strong, they play more with their peers, and you have better opportunities for success. You're not stuck in a situation where you're never successful.
And I think that's where the whole like closed league creates parity kind of argument falls down, because that really only is true if the only thing you look at is who's winning the title, like year over year, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at the league from top to bottom, like it you do get a lot of these less competitive matchups, wherein the leagues where teams are free to move based on merit, it tends to overall be more competitive. So yeah, I didn't know San Diego did that. I'm obviously a while removed from high school, and when I was in the Bay Area, they still did it by school size. But I would hope to know that they were doing it like San Diego now. I haven't looked into it truthfully, but
Yeah,
that's cool. I didn't know.
It was a little controversial at first, but I don't think there's any problems with it anymore. So
Yeah.
it's always interesting now when I hear a team is going for a title. Oh, what division are they in? Where are they playing? And sometimes a team might have been in Division One for a couple of years, but they've dropped down, and all of a sudden they win the Division Three title, and they're working their way kind of back up again. And it's I think it's better. I hope they continue to do it. I haven't heard anything like they're going to change, and it just makes it so much easier seeding the playoffs and everything else. And they do something special at the very top. They actually have I think, if I remember correctly, they call it Open Division and the First Division. They're all in the same division playing each other, but then the top 8 teams have their own playoff bracket that they do. But I think all those 8 teams, then, if they're state kind of qualifications, they automatically make it to the state qualifications by virtue of being the top 8 teams in the county. And then the other ones battle for the other part of the playoffs and the championship.
Cool.
And if that has changed at all and anyone's listening to it, then I'd love to hear how it's changed, but that's how it was and how it has been the last time I checked. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us. Hopefully got a little education on lower league pre-professional women's soccer here in San Diego, and have some teams. Maybe you can go check out some games this summer now that the leagues have started up. So check them out either at the WPSL website or the USLW website, and go check out some of those games. So speaking of that, Dylan, do you have any plans for watching soccer games this week besides tomorrow? Tomorrow, I know you got a big one. Go ahead and share that.
Yeah, well, so I'll be going to Fair Play for the Europa League final tomorrow. Other than that, I don't think so. I maybe Wave are home this weekend. I'm not sure, but yeah, I truthfully haven't really had much thought past tomorrow, so it's hard for me to say.
Yeah, I didn't usually. I tried to look ahead so I could share something this week, but I did actually look at the German Cup. Is happening this weekend, and what is it? Oh, what is their name? Armenia,
Bielefeld and
Stuttgart,
yeah, and the Pokal. I did see that.
Stuttgart in the final. Now, the Armenia Bielefeld is going to be in the second tier in Germany, but if they win this, they're going to be, I think, in the Europa League is what the winner gets. But they have a chance at possibly being in the second tier of Germany, but playing in Europa League if they win this title. Now, I would say I'd say on paper the odds are against them, but they've knocked off 3 or 4 first division teams on their way to get to the final. They're a stingy team. They don't let in too many goals. So this will be that's a big underdog story. I think that's one I'm really going to try to take in and hopefully see a big upset. I think that would be a crazy story. I believe it's this weekend.
Okay, yeah, I'll tune into that one then. And I believe Stuttgart would be breaking a huge title drought or trophy drought if they were to win. So I think either way, it's a good story.
Well, and just the fact that it's not any of the big, you don't have Bayern, you don't have Bayer, you don't have Dortmund, you don't have your usual suspects in there somewhere. So that'll be entertaining. It'll be someone new winning for a while.
Yeah, very cool.
All right. Well, as always, you can catch us here live if you want to listen to us on Tuesday nights on our YouTube stream. We go at 6 o'clock on the West Coast. Otherwise, you can catch us on all the podcasting platforms. Usually by Wednesday, the show is posted. We also partner with Two Balls and a Mic. They do, or SanDiego.futbol, and they do a podcast called Two Balls and a Mic, and that airs every Monday at 8 o'clock, so you can check them out. On YouTube, also, you can find our back soccer shorts documentaries. That's at BPD Soccer Shorts, BPD for Big Pine Digital. So BPD Soccer Shorts on YouTube for those. And you can follow us on BlueSky at soccershorts.bigpinedigital.com. All right, Dylan, any last thoughts before we head out of here?
Yeah, actually, I was just scrolling through FOTMOB while we were recording here, and the quarterfinals of the Canadian Cup are going on right now, and Montreal were eliminated today, and Vancouver are currently tied at 2. Vancouver just scored against Valor FC of Winnipeg with 10 minutes left, and if Valor FC can pull this off, it would be an all non-MLS Canadian Cup semifinal guaranteed, which I don't even know, has any of those clubs ever won the Canadian Championship? I don't think they have.
I am not as familiar, but now you have me intrigued. When we get off here, I think I'm going to go check it out.
The game is on Fox Sports 2, and on their website, you can get a 1-hour free viewing pass. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Jump on and catch the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. Maybe extra time. Free football.
Yes.
Yeah.
Free football. All right. Well, Dylan, thank you very much for that update there, and we'll definitely check that out as soon as we get off of here. But otherwise, enjoy your week of watching football, and we'll see you again next Tuesday.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.